G'day everyone, welcome to Get Lost with a Travel Guide. And I tell you, I've found someone absolutely mind-blowing and we've just had a little bit of a conversation and I'm dying to learn more. We've got Cody or Coedie, I'm sorry, I'm just still learning this. Found a music video on TikTok and it is exploding. And also it's going absolutely nuts right now on YouTube. And if you haven't heard it, it just blew me away. It's one of the best tunes. And also when I started to do, well, who is this guy? And then all of a sudden you're seeing a photo of you, you're environmentalist of the year, and you're also protesting. Please welcome to the protest of the podcast. How are you?
Well, Molly. Ngajunari Cody, ngaya wadawidi, ngaya Waddananggu mundu. Hello, my name is Cody. I speak Widi language. I'm from the Waddananggu people in central Queensland. Our family come from that area. We've always come from that area since time immemorial. We've had a mining company come to us and approached us for the biggest coal mine in the Southern Hemisphere. We said no in 2012. Then again in 2014, and so they paid off a few of our people in our group to get an agreement signed. Everything's been dodgy, and so since 2019, I've been coming out to this area in central Queensland. It's just north of Claremont. It's about probably 2.5 hours, 3 hours drive north of Claremont is the closest town, and so this coal mine is called Adani, the Carmichael coal mine. So this has been a very controversial mine for many, many years now. We've been fighting this for about 10 years. And so my father went through the federal courts. He went through 5 federal court cases, got derailed by the government with, the Attorney General stepping into cases to pretty much make us lose for wanting mining to go ahead. So we decided we'll go on the ground then. So we started coming out and we just started annexing property back from Adani. And then so what he's had to do, because I keep coming out and building big stone circles, they had to keep fencing all these places off so they can't go in there. I can't go in there either now, but at least they've been taken back. And so since 2019, I went onto a piece of property out there and built a big ceremony circle. I managed to stay there for 2 weeks, and they cut off my food and water supplies by blocking off all the entrances and exits to where I was. So essentially starved me out. So then in 2020, I come back and built a fire on the middle of the road. It took up both sides of the road, and it was just before a cattle grid. So it was a choke point. So Adani couldn't drive down that road. So I had this fire going in the middle of the road, probably 5 k's from his camp, going for 5 days. This fire was burning for. So we set it up with my family, and then we had some supporters come out to come and help us put up some signs and stuff like road blockage and everything. And so the negotiators came out, and I said this is an active beef between our mob and Adani. So don't get in my way.
Alrighty, folks, we just lost internet, but we've just got back. We've just reconnected. So you're actually up to the stage, if you don't mind finishing your story, you're talking about like the government coming in. You had like a fire going for about 5 days, and then it sort of cut out from there.
Yeah, so I built a fire in the middle of the road and pretty much told them that no Adani personnel, contractors or subsidiaries are allowed to use this road. Mind you, it was a public road. And so the road technically wasn't blocked because there was a little side gate. So the farmers and the public and the police were allowed to use that gate. It's just Adani Adani personnel weren't allowed to use that. So what we did was we sorry, my dog's going wild in the back here. He's just getting out.
It's all good. It's all good. So you hear the dog rattling in the background. That's fine.
Yeah.
But can I ask, what happened? So, like, for those who don't really know, I mean, like mining companies, massive in Australia, big multi-billions of dollars. So why did you want Adani to stop? What are you protesting for?
Okay, so the reason why we built this fire in the middle of the road was because we've been saying no to this mining company because where the mine is situated, it's about 10 kilometers away from Dungulbulla Springs. So Dungulbulla means many waters in our language. And so these spring systems are one of the most unique spring systems in the whole of Australia. It's one of the only spring systems that draws massive amounts of water from the Great Artesian Basin. So scientists have been working on this spring system for a fair few years now, and they still can't find the source of where these springs are coming from. They've put dye into the water. Scientists have said this is a very peculiar spring. They have no idea how it gets fed and where it's getting fed from. And so Adani was supposed to do all these environmental assessments of whether the springs are going to be affected from their mining. And so they actually didn't do any work. They basically wrote their own roadworthy and said, yeah, everything's right, mate, she'll be right. And they just said, yeah, the water tables aren't connected, where they had no proof of the water tables not being connected. And so we were like, well, why would we actively want to destroy something that has been there since the dawn of time? These springs are an ancient spring system that have always run. They've been there that long that there's palm trees there called the waxy cabbage palm that aren't grown anywhere else around in the world except for Dungulbulla, and it floats down into the headwaters of the Carmichael. There's aquatic species and there's animals there that aren't found anywhere else because there's always been water there. It's literally a desert oasis. You go out, it's semi-arid environment, and then you start walking into this area, and then there's palm trees in the middle of the bush, and you're like, what? So these springs have been the monumental piece of our religion, basically. So, you know, most Aboriginal people around this country will all have a similar story of the rainbow serpent. And the rainbow serpent is the spirit being that created all the mountains and the gullies and the rivers.
I think that's called Yiperinya in around like Central Australia, like around Alice Springs.
Yeah. So we call it Mundagutta there, the rainbow serpent. And so that's the final resting place for the Mundagutta because he sleeps in a body of water. So because this area has never gone dry. The area where the main spring is has never gone dry. That's why it's been super sacred to us that's where he lives. And so this mining company come along and just could think that they could just mine, you know, the closest spring is 7 kilometers away from the pit, and they think that this is not going to have any sort of effect on the springs, and so they're having to pump out massive amounts of water because they're draining the water table, but the water table keeps filling up and keeps filling their pits, so they keep having to drain it. It's like they've just opened a tap there and this water is draining, and so the water level has drained 50 meters in the water table in Dungulbulla already. So it's starting to get worse. And so I can't stand by and let the destruction of an ancient spring system happen while someone thinks that they can just make a profit from it where it employs 200 people. And so this man is now the third richest man in the world. Adani, the man that owns this mine, is the third richest man in the world. He doesn't care about rights. He doesn't care about springs.
Care about shareholders. Yep.
Exactly. So I'm there, and I've set up a camp. So in 2020, I built a fire in the middle of the road. Police came out. By the 5th day, they brought in 50 police officers to remove us. And then that day, I did a spit. I did a rap. And if you go onto my TikTok or even onto my YouTube channel, you'll see that spit that I did in front of the police officers. That is raw, man. Like you could never catch that again in its rawest form. You know what I mean? Well, we probably will in my line of work, but catching footage like just spitting bars at coppers where you don't know whether they're going to beat you over the head with a nightstick or
like
not.
Freestyle, you know what I mean? Rapping. So,
yeah, bro. Yeah. So like, check it out. And it's probably one of the most amazing things because you watch the coppers' faces and you can't pay people to be that awkward.
Yeah.
And so what we did was we baited them in. So under federal law, we're allowed to be on pastoral leases, and we're allowed to go hunting, camping, and fishing on Crown land.
Yeah.
So what we did was we set up our camp just inside about probably 250 meters from where the road was, and where the fire was, inside the pastoral lease, baiting the police in because we knew we were allowed to be there. But because it was Adani's property, he thought that we needed permission to be there, but we didn't, because according to native title, in the little loopholes in those laws we didn't have to ask for permission from Adani. So the inspector and the senior sergeant that came out to remove us from there, they're buddies with the head of security at Adani, because he's an ex-police officer. So what we did was we baited the police in, and then they removed us. So we said, yeah, righto. We all packed up, left. Nobody got arrested. Ever heard of anybody blocking a road for 5 days and not get arrested? It was amazing. And they were still all super nice the whole time. So we packed up. They were even super nice by removing us. They're like, man, just get the right instrument and you can come back. And they're like, man, this place is beautiful and everything. Part of it was condescending. But so we got out of there, went to Claremont. My old man went to Brisbane, put in a human rights complaint into the Human Rights Commission. So in Queensland here, we have an act called the Queensland Human Rights Act 2019. This act safeguards our rights to practice culture and develop our culture, develop our language, and not be forced into assimilation. So what happened was, by them forcefully removing us from that pastoral lease, they broke our human rights. They broke 5 of our human rights by removing us from there. The Human Rights Commission came back, said that we have a case against the Queensland Police. Let's have a mediation. So we went to a mediation. The police had to extend it because they had to get Crown lawyers involved. They rocked up. In the mediation, Crown lawyers said, we don't know who owns the land, because they can't prove it. There's no bill of sale. You know, everyone lives in this fantasy land in Australia that they think that Australian government owns this property. No, there needs to be some sort of bill of sale.
Yeah.
Because there's no proof that this place was unoccupied, because Eddie Mabo proved it in the High Court that Australia was not terra nullius, meaning Australia was not a land void of people. So there's only 3 ways you can take over a country in international law. That's terra nullius, means a land without people, war, or treaty. So the government hasn't done any of those. So they haven't done a treaty, and they're talking about the treaty now. So talking about the treaty means they haven't got a treaty yet. So not having a treaty means that we're still in an undeclared war. So what happened was, because we're still in this undeclared war, we put the Queensland Police into this jam because the Crown lawyers didn't have the evidence to prove that they own the land. So what happened was, they said, okay, well, this was like landmark, but because it's not in the courts, it hasn't become official type of things. So we said to the police, all right, we're not going to take this to court, because I thought of a good idea. I said, all right, let's get them to write an apology. I want them to write a letter of apology. I know it's not going to mean anything. I know it's going to be useless words as an apology, but I wanted them to put in, and what they did put in was, we acknowledge that Mr. Adrian Burragubba, which is my old man, represents a group of Waddananggu people aggrieved by Adani's occupation of their tribal homelands.
Right.
Just having that in there, written by the Queensland Police, has recognised us and our rights to protect our country.
Right. Can I just ask you a few questions?
What they've done, because
yeah. So I just really want to sort of understand, interpret. So I'm not a lawyer. Right, I don't perceive to know the law to that degree. Most people don't. And you're like, this is David and Goliath, because, as I said, they've got Queen's Council, they got amount of resources to try and keep the economy going in their eyes. But let's sort of unpack your side of the story here. So I know, like, for example, Uluru serves as a big flagship for handback of land because of a couple of reasons. Natural beauty. So people are like, oh my God, look at the rock, and it's beautiful, which is bloody true. But it's also cultural significance because of the practices by Indigenous culture for 50-odd thousand years at least. So when you talk about these natural springs, right, I didn't know this, but what I can tell you is what science says. When you look at Gondwana land, you got all the world together, and then it started to break off. And the Australian continent was one of the first, like, millions of years ago, right? And Australia used to be completely covered. It was like rainforest. It was like the Daintree rainforest. It was like that all over. And as it's drifted away, it's got so hot it couldn't survive. And a lot of these palm trees are gone, except for a few little pockets. So if you go like the mountainous regions or like the great dividing range of Australia, these rainforests have survived. So to find like, as you said, like these natural springs with palm trees out there, that's also potentially for geological significance, but I didn't realize it's also for cultural significance. Like, can you explain a bit about that, like with your culture and the cultural significance of why the land is so important?
Yeah. So, what people, the general public, need to understand is when one bit of land gets handed back, that's to that individual nation. So in Australia, we have 369 different countries with different languages, different culture, and different way of life. It's only because we're on one continent that that makes us a part of a same racial background. But that's through thousands of years of being here in this one continent. So the East Coast Aboriginals are as genetically different from the West Coast Aboriginals
Can I
as
just sort of
Siberians are to Alaskans.
can I just sort of summarize this for other people who don't really understand it? So if you take Europe, right? If you look at the European Union and if you live in Africa or wherever in the world and you go, oh, you're European, you talk to Europeans like, no, you're French, you're Spanish, you're British, you're Liechtenstein, you're German, and there's vast difference. You might all sort of look similar and be similar, but there's distinct differences. Now, there's probably about 50 odd countries in Europe. There's over, I think, at least over 100 different language groups within Australia. Or they said like up to 369. So it just paints a bit of a picture of like how multicultural traditional Australia really is.
Yeah, we're definitely like different facial features from all different parts and different body structures. You know, you've got the mob from Kuranda where they're the real short people. They're like the little pygmies, I guess that's not the right word to say. You know, they have
we've come along just gone, oh, you're all Aboriginal. Like you're the sort of same, where there's distinct differences, as you're saying. Yeah, so it's for that reason to maintain your cultural identity. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly, and our individual cultural identity. So springs all around the world are ancient. They're sacred places because water is life. You need water to live. So these places have always been sacred, and Dumulbula has always been there, even before humans have gotten around. That place was always there. So you're not going to taint a place that that's in an area. You know what I mean? You're not going to poison the water hole by trashing it and destroying it. So you make it sacred because the water that flows off into the rivers, you live on the sides of the riverbanks there. So this area has always been a sustaining life form. And, you know, Aboriginal people say all around this whole country, different nations say that we are connected to our country. Now, what people don't realize is when they start to think about that and they unpack that, each tribe has lived in their designated areas for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Now, if you're into botany and into biology, you'll find that each area that you go to around this whole country, there's microbes and there's different genetic makeups endemic to each area around this country. So if there's a group of people that are living in one area for thousands and thousands of years, and you're eating the plants, you're eating the dirt off the ground, all that dirt has microbes in it, and those microbes are endemic to those areas in their country because they're divided by watersheds. So it stays within that watershed. So when they say they're connected, they literally connected through genetically the same as their endemic area. So when Aboriginal people go back to their homelands and where they're from, they fit into their area and they're like, I feel home. And everybody will have that all around the world. Even Europeans have it because they've grown up or they're from an area that their ancestors have come from for thousands of years, and they've eaten those foods, and their gut biome has changed them genetically to be a part of their surroundings, because you are what you eat.
Mm.
So this is our connectivity. But the problem is, a lot of people and a lot of Europeans have lost that connectivity. So because there hasn't been such a long disconnection for Aboriginal people, it's still genetic in them. So it's like there's these traits that get passed down through genetics called epigenetics. It gets passed down through father to or daughter, and so on. And so these genetics are still strong that connect us to these areas. So this is why, I grew up in Brisbane a lot of my life. I was born in Townsville, but I grew up in Brisbane most of my life. But my grandfather got removed from Claremont at gunpoint in 1916, and got told, him and my great-grandfather and his wife, to get on a cattle truck, and they sent them to a POW camp called Cherbourg. So there's places called like Warrabinda.
Is this
Cherbourg,
where the
Palm
stolen
Island.
generation?
This is where all Aboriginal people got taken to in Queensland.
Yep.
And so what they've done is they worked out which languages can speak to who, probably like 50 years beforehand. So then they can transfer all these tribes around to different places so they couldn't speak to each other. And so they set these missions up because they needed to get them out of society so the settlers can push into central Queensland and all the way up into Queensland. So these places were concentration camps. You weren't allowed to leave. My grandfather kept trying to run away. They called him Breakaway Ernest because he kept trying to run away from Cherbourg. And if they catch you, you get put into solitary confinement and your family has their rations taken from them. So he got put into this area of no fault of his own for just being a black fella. And so this traumatic experiences happened to our people that they never returned home. They never returned home because they weren't welcome back in their own.
The strategy was, I think, to forcibly remove culture, and it was seen like, oh, you guys are barely even human. Like, you guys live in a very barbaric way. So let's try and do the right thing for God, King, and country, and now Prince Charles, to make you forcibly our culture. And this is a noble way to be, was, I think, the goal and understanding at the time. And as times progress, the powers that be, and we've really, like, there's still so many things unpacking in history, which just, I mean, they didn't have iPhones in that time. Like, imagine if iPhones existed then, and the amount of like, this is going to go on TikTok, and people are, what the fuck is going on here? But it never happened. It was sort of swept on the rug in an isolated part of the world, far, far away. And we're still very much a part of or just recently broke out of the British Empire. I know the stolen generation started in the 1800s or late 1800s. So we're technically,
it basically started as soon as they started transporting people back.
It didn't stop until like the 1950s. I think
people don't understand that child trafficking isn't anything new. Our children have been stolen for child trafficking around the world since they first got here. We've lost thousands and thousands of children that we've just gone missing. So, this is the fight that I've been taking on the government as well, because the government has been aiding and abetting this mining company to get it kickstarted. So they trampled all over our rights. So then we come back with the human rights. So we got this recognition from the Queensland Police. So then exactly 1 month after that, I rolled in and I created an event called Tour de Carmichael, which I rode a push bike along with 100 other push bikes down this dirt road for 100 kilometers down to Adani's camp, and I camped at the camp where I got kicked out the former year, just to prove a point to the police that you can't do anything. And so I just had this massive event called the Tour de Carmichael. They tried to get me to get a permit. I'm like, why do I need a permit to ride my push bike from the main road to my camp where I've been living? Because once we handed that thing into the human rights after we got removed, I went back in there a week later and stayed there for 4 months just to prove a point. And I lived there for 4 months in the middle of the bush. And
how did you survive?
So, we had like IBCs with water and stuff in there.
Yeah.
We're a lot more set up now, though, brother. But so then from there, that tour to Carmichael, we finished that event, and then August was coming up, and I said to all my friends that have been helping me out, like with logistical help and stuff like that, and they I said to them, I want to create an event for the 26th of August, because since 2019, I've been doing something every 26th of August out there, whether it's Occupy, just keep taking properties back every 26th of August. So we created this event called Waddananggu. So Waddananggu means the talking. So Wadda means talk. Then the na suffix on the end, making it Waddana, makes it talking. And then the ungu on the end makes it the. So the talking is basically incorporates anything from talking to our people in our tribe, to tribes from our neighbors, to distant tribes, to government officials, to non-Indigenous people that want to come and participate in this ceremony. So what I did was I set up this stone circle on top of a burn wall. And so this stone circle, we have a fire that we lit the first day that we got there. As soon as we got there, we lit the fire, and it's been going for since 26th of August last year. So 380 something days now. And so, and the funniest thing about it is I set it up to bait the police in.
Yeah.
And so, because I put this circle there, and then we've got this fire in the middle. And so we've got 3 rules. There's always one Waddananggu person inside the circle at all times. Rain, hail, shine, cold, hot, it doesn't matter. There's always one Waddananggu person inside this stone circle. The fire has always been going the whole time. And there's no foreign objects inside the circle except for your clothes that you have on you. You can't bring anything in. You can't bring phones. You can't bring watches. You can't bring anything in. So I got these 3 rules set up to bait the police in, because if they were going to come in and remove me from there, they would have to walk into the circle with their shoes on and their guns on. That's 1 rule they've broken. Then they're going to pick me up and take me out of the circle. That's 2 rules they're breaking, having 1 person inside. And then they're going to break 3 rules because the fire will end up going out.
All right, Cody.
So,
mate, I feel like we could go for hours on this, and I really want to, but I just want to make this podcast as impactful as possible.
Yep.
So one way to generate attention is to protest, set fire, and rightfully so, and respect for doing it. You're following your truth. But what I'm really interested to know, because I come across you with your song. Now, You said you freestyled rap as a protest. That is the most raw, authentic, like music to me. Like you hear stuff on Spotify or YouTube, or you hear CDs or professional musicians. It's so produced, right? There is a motive to write a love song. It's not necessarily to write a love song. It's to generate money. It's to sell.
Yep.
And when I come across music so authentic, that's what I found your song. Like the YouTube video you make, that's 1 take. There was no edits or cuts. So it's like, and I was watching that. I watched it a couple of times. Like, did you skip a beat? Did you like you got talent? You definitely got talent as a rapper. Can you tell me what inspired? How did you record this song? I'm telling you, this is gonna blow up. It's a banger. How many have you made?
I've got a fair few. I'm creating a Waddananggu EP. So, I mean, I've always made music my whole life. I mean, I've been making beats since I was 16 on Fruity Loops. I'm still using Fruity Loops. So that's my own beat that I made as well.
You're kidding. Does that have a didgeridoo? Did you record the didge to make that tone?
No, but I recorded it to play my didge over the track of it, as over the top of it as well.
Yeah.
Because I'm a professional didgeridoo player. I've been playing.
I think you've been with John Butler.
Yeah, I have. Yeah. I played up on stage. So I've played at all the biggest events in Brisbane, like Suncorp Convention Centre, River Stage.
Doing what?
And just playing the didge.
What, before the footy?
Before State of Origin.
Really?
Yeah, man. I played didge for multiple mayors, multiple premiers. I've done a performance for the Sultan of Brunei. I've done a performance for the leader of the IRA,
well, hang on,
Jerry Adams.
I'm confused. If you're protesting the government, how can you be working for the government?
Well, I mean, those were years ago. I haven't done any performances for probably like 15 years. And it's kind of like um, I'm protesting. Well, it's not really a protest. I'm contesting the fact that the government doesn't have the right to take compulsory acquisition for a mining company,
Mm.
which is the first time in Australian history that they've done for a mining company, which is supposed to be for main roads and hospitals and stuff like that, for public infrastructure, not for a mining company. So I'm contesting the fact that they're just bent over backwards and done all this shonky deals to get this through in the face of keeping good relations with India. So and it's about setting the record straight. You know what I mean? Like I'm not anti-government. I'm not destabilize the system, because I understand there's a lot of loose units out here, and these laws kind of keep them in check. You see them roo shooters out in the bush, like
Yep.
they look like some Wolf Creek type of people. I'm like, man, the laws are keeping those dudes in check.
Gotcha.
So I'm not a type of person that wants to.
They just need to reset their path in this particular instance.
Exactly.
You want to be on
I
the same
them,
page, but they've got this particular thing wrong.
I need them to protect my homelands. That's what I need them to do. And that's what I'm doing there, is I'm proving to the government that I'm not leaving until you protect this. So
well, making yourself known and getting your message out is a tremendous task, because a lot of people described tuned into WFM, or what's in it for me. So many people's got so much stuff on their own plate. Who cares, right? Not in my backyard. So long as I'm happy, boom. But it's not until you can resonate with someone's emotion. If you can emotionally connect with something, then people start to give a shit, you know. And music is a fantastic tool. If you can communicate in such a fashion or in such a way to really, it got my attention. Bravo! Here we are having a podcast about it, and who knows who might listen to this and spark someone else.
Yeah, exactly. And there's plenty more tracks coming out, and they're made to inspire other people. They're made to basically G people up, basically to G other tribes up to stand up. And
how long? It's such an inspirational. It's a magic. It's raw as shit, and it's what's brilliant about it. It's so authentic. It's the most authentic song I think I've ever heard, to be fair.
Thanks, man. I recorded in my little trailer. I got a little motorbike trailer.
Really?
Into like a I've got a little bed in there, and then so I've got this like $300 Focusrite mic and interface that I bought, and so it's a pretty shitty mic, but gets the job done.
But it works. And, like the quality. I just listened to it before this podcast, and I've got these beats, like Dr. Dre's, you know, they're excellent quality. And because I only heard on my computer before, I'm like, okay, how's the bass line? Like, you've done a tremendous job of recording that tune. Like the sound level, you got the EQs really well. It was a job well done.
I've spent a bit of time making beats, so I've got a little bit of experience in that, which comes in handy. You know what I mean? Because I could just sit out in the bush and make my own music, and that's raw authenticity of rap.
How can you stick this in front of people's faces? Like send your story. Like if you're freestyling a rap to the police, and if you film it and send it to the news, eventually someone's going to go, it's such an incredible, I've never seen it before. Like it's never seen such a tool used in such a way with someone with your talent.
Cheers. Like it's something that nobody's ever prepared for. The cops weren't prepared when I just started spitting bars. Hey, like they were just like, they have never been more embarrassed in their life, I think, because I made them think about things. I made them question their whole reality of everything. You know, every time I talk to police officers out here, I blow their fucking minds.
Can you record some of that? Do it again, perhaps, but get someone and make snippets, chuck it on TikTok. It'll blow up.
Yeah. Well, I've got that video on TikTok if you wanted to check it out. I've pinned it, so it's up the top. Next to my other one. So if you just go on Gurridyula, you'll be able to see it there. Gurridyula means wedge-tail eagle. I'm the wedge-tail eagle, my totem.
Gotcha.
So it's it's fun, man. I love making music, and I'm definitely going to be releasing heaps more albums, heaps more songs and stuff while out here.
I'd seen also on your Instagram you won an award. It said Environmentalist of the Year.
Yeah,
What
I guess
happened?
that's kind
What's that?
of. I look at it as a side gig, man. It's not something that I set out to get. I'm just trying to protect my country, and at the same time, it correlates with the environment because my culture is so connected to the trees and the animals that the protection of my culture is the protection of those trees and animals. So then it intertwines with each other. So then it gives me the opportunity to access the environmental movement and say that, well, to fight for Aboriginal land rights is to fight for the environment because the protection of our totemic animals and our totemic trees is the protection of all environment there. That means like no having cattle in there because it's got to grow back native foods.
Gotcha.
So this correlation in between the two is I'm drawing the lines together and I'm saying to them it's like a spear tip. You come from a different angle and a different point of view on how you want to see this world and where it's going, and I do as well. And we end up meeting at a little spear tip point. So then, I've started to garner more and more support from the environmental movement to the fact that, I've got so many friends now that want to help me. And some of them are like some of the best organizers in the environmental movement. And they've helped me organize like a 1-year anniversary with 150 people out in the middle of the bush, so I'm so grateful for a lot of the help that I get. And, people might say stuff, oh, I'm working with Greenies. I work with anybody. If a right-wing group want to come and work with me, I'll work with them, but it's like, I'm open to support from anybody and whoever. It doesn't matter who it is. It just so happens that my goals align with what environmentalists see as what their future should look like. And so, I mean, they, I guess, thought that I was the best suitor for environmentalist of the year. I guess I was like, cool, thanks.
You have such a phenomenal story. We're going to have to wrap this up. We're just about out of time. But I just really want to thank you for taking the time. I'm busy. We're all busy, but I'm glad you sent that music out. I'm glad, your heart, I believe, is in the right place. And like I said, I respect anyone who fights and defends their truth. And hey, there's a good part of me. I reckon you're going to be famous. I think if you keep doing what you're doing and produce more music and get enough attention, it just might just spark that big thing, and who knows what can happen. You just keep going.
Well, I mean, there's not every day a rapper gets to take on the third richest man in the world.
But people rap about stupid shit. Like you're rapping about real. This is real. This is so raw. Yep. It's the most authentic song, like I said, I've ever heard.
Cheers, man.
Ever.
I've got it's coming out on Spotify this week, hopefully.
That's not even on Spotify yet. That's how raw it is.
So fresh. And then I've got another song as well. It's called Rise of the Phoenix as well. They kind of like play off each other a little bit.
If you can write more bars about protesting against the government and mining, because that does make national news.
Book of rhymes on that.
Please, I can't wait. Just if you release more of those tracks, it would just generate that enough attention.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully spur up a Eureka Stockade again or something like that. You know what I mean?
Who knows? After experiencing a pandemic, anything's possible. Yeah. What could be?
For sure. I escaped all of that, brother. I was out in the bush. I was self-isolating in the bush. I escaped it all. I was like, yes.
I'll tell you what, when World War III breaks out, we'll be wiped out and you'll be continuing on.
Well, that's it. There's always a extra room here at Waddananggu, brother, so you're more than welcome.
I'm there. You're the first. When World War III breaks out, you're the first person I'm calling.
Oh, for sure, bro. For sure. I got my 14,000 anchors annexed from Adani now in my top end. So, cheers. Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much, Cody, for the chat.
No worries, brother.
You made it to the end of the podcast. All right. You know the drill. Give us a like, subscribe, or leave some juicy comments. And thank you so much for listening to Get Lost with the Travel Guide, where we talk all things travel, tourism, and adventure. See you next time.